All right, episode one. So I think maybe we can start off with why we decided to do a podcast and maybe why we named it what we did.
All right. And
So,
that originates with you.
right.
So
Well, I just thought
what's
since
your story, man?
all right, should we just start off with the intros and backstories and that kind of shit?
Yeah.
All right. So let's introduce my. Oh, I'm Jason, and this is Arlen, and so he's my stepfather since I don't know, like the year 2000 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
All right, and so like we met, when I was about 19, 20 years old, I think is what it was, maybe 20 years old, and we didn't really start talking until maybe about a year after we met. I think we became friends, but
Yeah.
he married my mom, so it was bound to happen. We were going to develop a relationship of some sort. So to kind of go back and give you like a brief like summary of where I was at, I think I'll start way back when I was like 2 years old because that's kind of relevant because I had an accident where I got choked out by a toy chest with a lid that closed on me and choked me out, killed me. And then my mom came in and found me pretty much dead on the floor and had to do CPR, brought me back. And then I don't know how long I was in a coma, but I think I was out for a little while. And then when I came back, I had some brain damage, obviously, because I had to relearn how to talk. And then since then, my entire life, I've had really bad. Well, when I was young, it was a lot worse. Speech problems where I would mumble a lot. I had speech aphasia where I lose words, especially when I was nervous. It was hard to communicate. And then I would transpose like letters and stuff like that. So I had that issue,
You
but
had
literally,
you had speech aphasia.
yeah, I still do to some degree.
Yeah. Tell me more about what that is. I don't recognize that.
It just means you lose words, right? Where like it's a common term or word you use a lot, but for some reason you just can't think of it. It's like at the tip of your tongue, but it
Yeah.
happens a
Yeah.
lot, right? And so you're constantly trying to substitute different words to express yourself, and it sort of makes it hard to communicate,
Yeah.
right? But I'm a lot better at it now. But like as a kid, it was hard.
Uh-huh.
And another one of the things was what happened. I think after the accident is I would have these horrendous, horrible like rage episodes. I think starting from when I was like real young, where I would turn over furniture and mattresses and stuff like that. I just had a lot of like rage for some reason. That continued all the way up until I was probably about 18 years old, and then it stopped suddenly. And I'll talk about why. But
Uh-huh.
so anyways, there's that, and then I don't want to get into too many details. But there was also like a lot of mental, emotional trauma, physical trauma that I experienced as a kid, right? And so by the time I was a teenager and going through puberty and stuff like that, I had really, really, really bad problems. Like terrible identity disorder, attachment disorders. I was super like awkward socially because I had bad social anxiety. And sorry, I don't think I communicated all that well. I would get picked on, and since I had anger problems, that led to a lot of fights. In schools, and I pretty much got kicked out of every school, high school at least I ever attended. I even got kicked out of a continuation and had to go to a continuation of the continuation. You know,
Yeah.
I was a loser, right? I wasn't even like cool, like the cool bad boy. I was
Yeah.
awkward and I didn't have any friends because I wasn't good at relating to people and stuff like that, and I had really bad rage and anger problems, and so.
Yeah.
And it got worse during my teen years to the point where, I was overthrowing the house of furniture, punching holes in the walls, even like hurting animals and shit like that. Like I was 100% on my way to either killing myself or hurting someone else and going to prison or being dead for sure. 100%. So I think, and what was trippy was I got a job at a animal kennel. So just like,
Yeah.
taking care of the dogs, Elaine's
Right.
in Fresno, yeah.
How old were you?
I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Mid-teens.
Yeah, I think probably 17. I worked there for a little bit. And I made a friend there, and she started inviting me to these raves. It was like these dance parties they would have, like underground in warehouses and shit like that. So I remember Mega Buzz 1998 in San Francisco was the name of the rave. And so I went there and I tried ecstasy for the first time, right? MDMA. I was also experimenting with drugs a lot as a kid. So I took LSD for the first time when I was like 15. I smoked weed for the first time when I was 12. I was smoking cigarettes and all that kind of stuff, right? So I was using drugs pretty young. So anyways, I got a hold of some ecstasy, some MDMA. It was like pure. And then it had like a profound experience, like almost like from my experience was that I was like completely overcome with like the love of God for like 5 hours straight, right?
The love of God, as in God's love for you, or
right,
your
right,
love
yeah,
for God?
Both, just
oh,
like
okay.
pure love, like.
So this would be a communion or a oneness with God, the source of everything.
Right, and I just went around the rave the whole night telling people I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, since from that day forward, like my rage problems were terrible. Like I would have I felt like a bomb was going off in my stomach, and I had no control over myself. I was just completely fly off the handle. But since that day, that one night, I never had a rage episode again after that.
Huh.
Yeah. And they've done a bunch of studies now about MDMA assisted psychotherapy for treating soldiers and stuff with PTSD. Right. And so, like, I think that's just what happened. Whatever it is that is helpful in treating PTSD for, like, these soldiers, the treatment-resistant soldiers and stuff like that who come back with all this war trauma.
Right.
They go through 3 sessions with these MDMA, and then they're essentially cured. They don't no longer meet the criteria of having PTSD, right?
Right.
So that was like a pretty profound change in my life, was not having that rage anymore, you know. I still had identity disorders, attachment disorders. I was still awkward as fuck and didn't have very good social skills, but I wasn't on my way to prison anymore. You know what I mean? It was just gone. I became like a nice person with, you know, shitty social skills, basically.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, then I went away to the Army boot camp or whatever. And then I came back, and when I got back, I started partying pretty heavily again with, you know, people, because there's always people hanging around the house. And so I started using a lot of, like, psychedelics again, a lot of LSD, used mushrooms, just experimenting with different kinds of, like, psychedelics. And one of the issues I was still going through is, like, just like not fitting in anywhere, not really having an identity, not knowing who I was. There didn't really have a sense of there being a center to my being or who I was or anything like that. So I was still struggling a lot with that.
Yeah.
And so I think most of my peak experiences have come from the use of psychedelics, right? So I had two more major like sort of life events involving psychedelics or realizations. The first one was, you know, I was trying to hang out with all kinds of different people. There was hipsters involved and stuff like that, and people would get to know me a little bit, and I was just too awkward and weird for them, you know, and they end up rejecting me or something like that. So I didn't really have a place, you know, that I fit in. I didn't really have any friends or anything, besides, like, you know, sisters and brothers and stuff like that who I hung out with. But so what happened was I don't remember what it was. I think it was like a high dose LSD or something like that, and I was just sitting there, and I was trying to think about, you know, who am I? Right? You know, I'm not this, I'm not that. You know, am I hopeless? Am I ever going to have an identity? Right? And then normally now, from then, and then every time I've done psychedelics since, like, I have this experience where I'm sharing consciousness with a higher being, right? So they're sharing their expanded consciousness with me. Not that I have my own expanded consciousness that I'm engaged in, but something else is present and they're sharing it with me, and I can use their mind.
outside of you.
Yeah, that's my experience when I'm on psychedelics. But so I had that experience of something sharing consciousness with me, and then I had this like grand realization that actually having anxiety or an identity disorder is a blessing, right? Because, you know, having an ego and always having to like protect it, defend it, proliferate. God damn it. Proliferate? Is that the word?
Yeah, I
proliferate? God damn it. And you're
Yeah.
always comparing yourself to other people. There's so much anxiety and energy all wrapped up into maintaining this, you know, illusion of yourself, this culturally derived identity, right? And
Right.
it's like a burden. It's like a ball and chain that it's like something people suffer from is their own egos, right, and their own
Right.
identity. And so, like, the insight I had was actually, who I am is nobody. I am a nobody, but instead of that being a bad thing, that's actually a blessing. It's a great thing. It's awesome, right? And so, like, I had that insight, and that really one of them that really changed my life right there was just that insight. I don't have to try to be anybody. I'm nobody. And so, anytime I have any anxiety about how I relate to people or what my role is or my identity, I just
Right.
remember I'm nobody. And that's kind of helped me a lot, right?
Yeah.
So the third one, and this leads to where I started talking to you, was I was on another high dose psychedelics again, and I had this like really crazy experience where I was just sitting there and I just woke up, like I had this experience where like I felt like I was like half asleep my entire life, and I just had this experience that I just woke up and it's like, holy shit, I'm alive. What the fuck?
Yeah.
And it's never gone back. So I felt that like it's never gone back to sleep since then, right? And that was like 20 something years ago.
Did you notice visually? Did your visual, particularly like colors, did they become more vivid?
Well, I was on psychedelics, so yeah.
Well, no, I mean,
so everyone's going nuts with shit moving around and shifting in psychedelic patterns and stuff.
Yeah, but when that cleared up, you were still awake. Did life seem to be more, the colors were more of whatever color they were?
No, that I don't remember that. It was more like
Okay.
an internal feeling, I had more conscious. Maybe I went from a tunnel vision to like this in a sense of
Right.
like consciousness or something like that.
Another thing that comes to my mind, I'm wondering if it has to do with your experience, is earlier when you mentioned the rave, and you became aware of the experience of loving and being in the presence of love,
Right.
and that sounds like there was a emotional or opening of the heart chakra.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then coming forward to where you were just now, where you woke up and went from the tunnel vision to a broader perspective, kind of looking at reality from a higher up place than where you had before been looking. And I'm wondering if that might have had to do with the opening of intuition, the third eye level of consciousness, where we can see more of what we're seeing.
Yeah, like establishing some kind of connection with the subconscious or something like that.
Well, and I think that if it has to do with intuition, I think it definitely has to do with accessing the subconscious.
Yeah, it's like establishing like a communication protocol with your deeper self or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it will seem very, for me, it seems very other. Not so much now, but early on, I associated it with some divine source of wisdom, outside of myself. I saw it as it was me, but it wasn't part of what I was referring to when I said I. So in that sense, it was otherness. It was an other. Certainly other than my conscious self, other than my ego self, my defined or symbolic self. These mental constructs that we have of what we are, that pertains to ego. I think when people say the word ego, I think this is what they're referring to. But that's only what's on the computer screen. It seems to me. That the rest of what's going on is down on the hard drive and in the memory, underneath what we we don't see, but we become aware of that it's there. Similar to like with the computer here,
Yeah.
I'm looking and I'm seeing, I'm hearing the sounds, I'm seeing the movement on the screen and whatnot. But I know that this is connected to this vast amount of activity going on, beyond what I see.
That's funny, man. That's crazy because I've been thinking about like just what you're saying right now. Like last night, I tried out this thing. Have you heard of Chat? I think it's GPT.
Oh, the AI,
Yeah,
artificial intelligence chat thing.
yeah. So I had about an hour, hour and a half conversation with it last night,
Yeah.
and I was asking it questions about quantum computing, right? And
Yeah.
how, so there's a thing called a thread, right? So if you have a processor, you have cores. Normally, each core will have two threads, right? And
Uh-huh.
so one's used for caching, the other one's it's basically a virtual task handler, right? So
Uh-huh.
it's like the virtual version of a core, a physical core, and it processes requests basically, right?
Uh-huh.
So I was asking it, so in quantum computers, is it possible for a thread to be in superposition, right? And I was wondering, and we had like, I kept asking it questions about that, but yeah, theoretically it's possible for an entire thread to be in superposition.
Uh-huh.
And so if that's the case, if it is in superposition, I wonder if that would be the catalyst for self-reflection, right? And maybe, the development of like general intelligence or something like that. And
Uh-huh.
then it said, yeah, that is a good theory, maybe, but, so it went on like that. But, and,
Well, hell, Jason, it sounds like you found found
a
somebody
companion.
that can bat ideas around with you as well as I can.
Yeah. It was really interesting, too. You should try it out. But anyways, I've been thinking a lot about lately how like we have the cortex, right? And the cortex is like a binary system, binary computing system, similar to like what we use in our regular computers.
Uh-huh.
And then there's this theory of quantum consciousness because we have these like micro tubulars or something, tubules. Goddamn, see, my speech is fucked up. Micro tubes, some kind of microtubes, and they deal in quantum states, right? Because they're like subatomic particles within the neurons in these microtubulars, right? Tubules. And so it could be like that we have different computing states in our brain. We have in the subconscious, or the intuition comes from more of a quantum computing system within the
Uh-huh.
brain. And then there's some kind of communication protocol between that quantum computing section and then the prefrontal cortex, which makes requests to the quantum computer. Like, so a lot of times if you ask yourself a deep question, right, a lot of times you get a full concept in return, right? It's not a linear set of logical, flows. It's like
Right.
a fully like made concept that
Right.
pops into your
Yeah,
head.
the conclusion rather than the process of arriving at the
Right.
conclusion.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it takes you weeks to decompress that, to unzip it, decompress it before it turns into a working theory in, the cortex. And we can actually cache it. Once we make the call and it comes up, we can actually cache that, response and come back to it any time now because we have this sort of space in our memory where we can continue to decompress or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, so that's like maybe what you're talking about with the computer is like we're making calls to a much more advanced computer system within our own brains. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a book called Let George Do It. It was one of my early inquiries into intuition. I actually studied intuition quite extensively for a period of time. And in the book, Let George Do It, it was using metaphors like there's this service window that you walk up to. The picture they used was similar to what the windows at banks or post offices used to look like in the 50s, where there's a window with the bars on it, and a place to pass stuff beneath the bars. And but anyway, so you come up to that window, and George is there, and you give George a question, and he says, "Okay, let me go in the back and see if I can find it," And then after a while, he comes back and says, "Okay, here's what it is." And that was kind of the metaphor for how we use our intuition. As you say, we can task our intuition to sort out things.
Mm-hmm.
And a kind of interesting and might be funny story about your mom and I is that I went to, before I met your mom, actually about 5 or 6 years. I had gone to a whitewater rafting trip, and at the campfire entertainment, this one fellow gave us a riddle, and he said, if you want the answer to the riddle, you can sleep on it and see if you figure it out. And if you want the answer, we'll be at the bus in the morning before we leave, and I'll give you the answer. Well, I made a point to be down at the river fishing, so I wouldn't be tempted, kind of like the Greek myth of the sirens and strapping myself to the ship's mast. But so I wouldn't be tempted to be, because I believed that I had the ability to figure out the answer to that riddle with my intuition. This was a faculty that was very important to me, and so I set it up that way. Now, it took me 2 years of pondering the answer to that, and then I finally got the answer to the riddle. And one of the early conversations I had with your mom, I was doing things to be impressive, and so introducing myself, and this was my way of presenting to her that I was very keen on intuition. And so I told her the story about the riddle, and I told her the riddle, and she said, "Well, I sure can't figure that out." And so 2 days later, in a conversation we were having, she says, "I figured out the answer to the riddle." And I said, "Well, this is going to be a hell of a deal. It took me 2 years to figure it out, and you did it in 2 days. So I wonder what does that tell us about the potential of our relationship?" And sure enough, she had the answer. And
what was the riddle?
Well, the riddle was that you're lost in the forest somewhere, a jungle, and you come to a fork in the path, and one direction goes back into the wilderness, and path of no return, and the other path goes back to civilization. And at the fork in the road, there's this native, an indigenous person is there, and you're thinking, well, they probably know the path. And the way the riddle is set up, that you can ask one question, and from the answer to that question, you can determine which way to go to get back to civilization. Now, here's the deal. In this area, there are only two tribes. There's the truth sayers and the liars. And so the way the riddle is set up, the person you're talking to, you don't know which tribe, but you know for certain that they either have to tell you the truth or they have to tell you a lie. And so then you have to figure out what is the question that will give you the information you need to know which way to go. Mm-hmm. So that's the riddle.
All right. So for our viewers, they can leave the answers in the comments section.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. We can do that. And then just to debate them a little bit, let's just say that, 2 or 3 episodes down the path here, we'll come back to the riddle. We'll discuss what the answers are, and then give the answer that we have. My hunch is that there isn't only one answer.
There's probably multiple right answers.
There isn't only one question to ask in order to ferret out the information one needs to know which way to go.
That's
now,
interesting.
your mom shortcutted it because she recognized it as a math problem, a type of math problem, having to do with positive and negative numbers. And there was some kind of intuitive insight for her by framing it that way that came to the fore. The insight came to the fore that then gave her the question to ask that would then give her the information to know which way to go with certainty. And so I kind of attribute that to I was working strictly on waiting for the complete final question from my intuition rather than using more the cognitive processes along with the intuition to get to the answer, and the answer is the right question. Is what the solution is, having the right question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she combined the intuitive and the more cognitive or logic processes in the form of math. She was able to use those in combination and get to the answer, the right question, in 2 days instead of 2 years.
Yeah.
And to me, that illustrates a little something about the nature of intuition. The intuition will eventually tell you everything you need to know to survive if you survive long enough. Mm-hmm. But in evolution, I think intuition is an instinctual faculty that is the basis of natural selectivity, and how to be selected, how to be fit enough to be selected to survive longer, right? I watched the squirrels here at Squirrel University, and it seems to me that they don't have to figure stuff out. Right. They just sense what to do.
They're born with the answers on how to survive in their environment.
And I think that is very similar to what we call intuition.
Yeah, I think so. Except that it's different with human beings because, we can sort of, make requests to it from a layer of, our brain that doesn't exist with those animals, right?
I think so, which has
almost
to do
like two external
self-consciousness.
Yeah, so we have like
self-awareness.
Two layers, almost like our prefrontal cortex is another external layer of reality to like the limbic system almost, right? And then we have the external reality. But even human beings' external reality is just completely painted with symbolism and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's almost indistinguishable from our own minds and our own culture, right?
We don't just see what is, we see what is means.
Yeah.
We see what is means.
So to wrap up my story there was after I had that awakening thing, I think it was the very next day, you were going to help me change my brake pads.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I went over to your house to help you. You were going to help me in your garage to change my brake pads, and you asked me how it was going, blah blah blah, and I told you the story about what happened, with the whole waking up thing the night before.
Right.
Right, and that sort of established. You showed a lot of interest. You asked a lot of questions and stuff like that, and so we kind of had a long conversation. The first one.
Right.
Right, and then you've had similar experiences, not relating to psychedelics, but very similar to what I've experienced, right?
Right. Yeah, similar experiences, but more. Without the chemical intervention.
Right. So I need to maybe talk about your your backstory or whatever.
Yeah. So I remember that first encounter, and it did pique my curiosity for several different reasons, but one was that I was very familiar with what is called mystical experiences in the tradition of the consciousness movement, the evolution of human consciousness, and people who participate in that actively throughout thousands of years. And the mystical experiences or intuition, experiences of intuition, insight, realizations, enlightenment, those kinds of things. And so what you were describing seemed to be very similar. And so it piqued the curiosity that it just now did. A couple of the events and what you were accounting piqued my curiosity. I wanted to know more about it, and so that inquiry, that interest in you, made there was a shift in our relationship because there was a bond there. you got that I got you.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me was part of, even though this was 25 or so years ago, um, I saw myself as a leader, as an elder in a movement, and so I I was struck, like I said, multiple ways that caught my attention was that you were someone who was early in, so far as I knew, this was your first experience. I didn't know about your prior mystical experiences, but I um, I had to make a conscious choice, Jason, because in my attempt to reach out to you and to be uh, someone of worth value to you, right, and to maybe there's stuff I've run into. I've been on the planet longer than you have, so I might be useful in some way, and my social anxiety had to do with making myself useful.
Mm-hmm.
But all attempts to make myself useful to you um, only activated probably your social anxiety, the vulnerability of that kind of relationship. Kind of riled you up, and so I was rebuffed, and I wasn't particularly happy about the way you had been treating me. But I had to make
What before then?
yeah, before then.
Okay. Uh huh.
But I was in this place where I could see clearly that I've got to set that aside. If I'm really committed to being here for this young man, for what's happening for him as a part of this larger movement that I see myself as being a part of, uh, I have to let go of all that. And so that's what went on for me there at that point, was the letting go. And I have to say, as I've shared with you before, but for the listeners, it helped them kind of catch up on what we're up to. But as I've said before, is that that was the beginning of what has paid off extremely well for me to have a broader perspective on things, an alternative perspective, because I was looking at it all strictly from my own experimentation and then the writings of the ancient teachings. And what you have brought is a more contemporary, more science based experimentation. So, I mean, some of the stuff I get from you is from your academics, your academic study, which has been valuable, because I'm not particularly strong on the academics of things, whereas you can absorb that stuff and then bring it into conversations in a way that enhances my own perspective. So I'm just alluding to some of what I meant when I said that it's paid off extremely well. So I'm kind of starting on this end, and then I can go back to the earlier of my own journey. But I'm starting here by talking about my experience, my side of our relationship, the beginning of our relationship, and our largely intellectual collaboration
Mm-hmm.
in the exploration of what is. What
Yeah.
is me and what is life, and
Right.
that brand of philosophy. But going back, for me, of course, I have to go back more than 20 years, being at 80 years old now. But there are some themes that I've come up with in the last 5 years. I've been doing a lot of inventory, and the riddle I've been working on for the last 5 years is, so how the hell did I end up here instead of there? And in doing that inventory, I see themes, threads that run through it, or rivers that run through my life from very, very early. And I think one of the major themes is this intuition. So far as I know, I'm um, fairly dyslexic. What um, well, now I'm demonstrating the dyslexia thing. Um, who's the owner of Virgin? Um, Branson.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Anyway, well, he's dyslexic. He refers to it as dyslexic thinker, as a way of thinking, a way of processing. And so anyway, so in school, um, academics is about memorizing and recalling stuff. And for a person who has limited capacity to concentrate, even concentrate for experiences to be registered in the memory banks, um, academics don't work well. Academic education, um, the industrial arts, hands-on, skill-based, rather than knowledge, memorized information based. I I did fine. I pulled straight A's
Mhm.
in the in that side of the education. But in the scholastics or the academic side, um, I did good if I got a C. That was an A for me. Um, Most of the time I'd get a D, so I was still passing. But I felt like a failure because I was measuring. I was a duck at a dog show, and I kept measuring myself by how well the dogs could play fetch and how they could strut and roll over and all these things that I just wasn't very good at. And so the point of this, what I'm saying here, though, is that how I survived to even get a D wasn't by having a D level memory. It was intuition. There were enough tests that were multiple choice that I could guess. And thanks to my intuition, I could guess accurately enough to pull out a D.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if I had to write an answer, I couldn't remember what the answer was, but I could guess, I could make up one, an answer what I think it is. And in the willingness to guess, I would guess accurately enough to get a D instead of an F. And over time, I've come to realize that that was my intuition. So intuition kind of saved my ass,
Mm-hmm.
even before I understood anything about it. And so, there's a couple other themes have also to do with intuition. I think intuition is related in some way, or is the means or faculty of what is called mystical experiences. Even as a child, I just knew things that my peers didn't know. And I had a more cosmic perspective on life. And what I mean by cosmic is a bigger view, more like that one that you were just saying, where it opened up and it became less myopic
Mm-hmm.
and more balcony view, overview. And so that is in some places that's referred to as a cosmic perspective or cosmic consciousness. And in that larger view, you just see the connection between things, and you see things that don't fit. Uh, the My logic was very different because I was factoring other things into the if then therefore process that my peers or even the adults around me wouldn't do. And so gradually I became aware of this peculiarity in how I see the world. And and I also used it as a bit of a defense mechanism, where I could see myself as actually superior to my peers, because I knew stuff that they didn't know. and or even adults, and so I could do some what I think was to some degree toxic self-soothing with that superiority
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Like an
mindset.
overcompensation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
overcompensation, and it messed with my humility. Humility turns out to be an incredibly important asset. Uh, you know, humility is a space in which we can learn, and if we don't have any humility at all, then we've got it all figured out, and there's nothing else to learn, and we're not going to notice anything different because the filter, the design of the mind is to protect us or to protect who we think we are. So if my knowledge base is part of who I am and it's whole and complete and doesn't need anything more, then my nervous system is going to protect me from noticing anything that contradicts that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so humility is the only treatment for that kind of state of mind. And so eventually, I did my initiations into the necessity of humility, and I wouldn't say that I adopted humility, but I was forced, forced by the reality of life to recognize that, well, as the kids used to say in school, they thought they were hot shit, but really they were just a warmed over turd.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an element of that, for me, and acquiring the humility, uh,
um,
and then balancing that so it's not overcorrection.
when I was working with the guys in the prison, that's like something I noticed a lot. To where so they're going through a huge transition, right, from like sort of a very cynical, antisocial, violent kind of
Right.
mentality, and the guys who really want to change, there's a process they go through before the pro-social. You don't worry about them coming back to prison, right? And so almost always they have this initial. I think they have a cynical worldview, and there's a lot of reasons why that is. And we can talk about this in a future episode. Just dig into like the different personality types and in the,
Yeah.
sort of the shadow type and criminal behavior and stuff like that.
Right.
But like they all tend to have this almost like when they have this realization that they have hope for themselves. There are such things as good people in society. Society isn't fundamentally corrupt, right?
Right.
And they want to participate now in this pro-social sort of way. And they all tend to get this strange like what's it called when you have like not an identity but like you have this way of thinking about yourself,
Euphoric.
no, like they thought they were Jesus. They had like a
Oh,
Jesus.
okay. Messianic.
No, it's like it's a. But anyways,
But it's an over. It's
yeah, they have
it's
this
a hyperbolic.
overreaction, right? They went from feeling like they're pieces of garbage or pieces of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then
You
they
know,
swing to the exact
yeah, the
opposite.
exact opposite side, right? And
Yeah.
so you have
Go
to
from
like
being a piece of shit to being a saint.
right. Now they're like the second coming of Christ, right?
Yeah,
But
right.
you have to like be patient with them there because it's part of the process because that
Exactly.
will eventually the pendulum just swung, but at
Yeah.
least the pendulum's moving now and it settles somewhere in the middle, right? And
Right,
I
yeah,
notice that as
yeah.
a pattern. We're working with these guys.
Right.
Yeah, I went through that too.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're right about that. It's all part of the process.
Yeah.
And so we're coming up on our 1 hour time here.
There's not really any time limits, but
Oh, okay.
we can cut it at an hour if you want. I think this has been a pretty awesome first episode, in my opinion.
One thing I think would be good. This is so typically Arlen. It has to do with my attachment to the intellectual side of things. But takeaways.
All right.
I like to identify. Well, as I would say with my clients, my ADD just kicked in. What's happening in these ADD moments is that I'm getting all of a sudden the menu pops up of what to talk about, and
Uh-huh.
I become overwhelmed with the options, and it breaks my train of thought, breaks my concentration. Takeaways. Uh, I used to say to my clients, okay, we just spent an hour of your life, right? You just invested an hour of your life in this conversation. So what did you get out of it?
I mean,
I
we
mean,
wouldn't normally do that like when
we
we're,
both had a good time,
yeah.
but was there anything else that, is there any takeaway, anything you can take and use? You know, so I'm thinking, uh, I think it's a good idea to stop on a regular basis and look at whatever just happened and say, okay, what have I learned? We're always in a state of becoming. We're always in a state of learning. But I think that if we process it consciously, there's added benefit than just leaving it down in the shadow. So what are the takeaways for you? Or were there any?
I don't know. That seems a little formal for me. Like I wanted to keep it. We don't do that in our regular conversation. That's what I wanted to do is just take how we would normally have a conversation and just put it on film. But we
Right.
could do that if we want. I mean, there's no rules. Um, I don't know because we've been through this before, so this is kind of a round two for us, right? So we're just kind of setting things up. So
Well,
I'm not sure.
let me, since it's my idea, just throw it back at me
Yeah,
and
you go
say, deal
first.
with it, guy.
Yeah.
Uh, so I've learned some things about you that I didn't know. Like for example, the prior mystical experiences that you had, uh, before that conversation, before the one we had the conversation in the garage about, I didn't know about those. I knew you'd gone to raves, but I didn't. Well, I think I remember you telling me about that. You loved everybody. You went around telling everybody that you loved them.
Yeah.
But anyway, there were other details um, about your life, and more details about what we'd call the hardship of your childhood. Um, I also learned that you and I have some similarities around what I think constitutes dyslexia, and or at least maybe you've overcome it. But when you were saying younger, being able to concentrate and
No, I was good at concentrating and learning.
remember your words. I have a thing that has a phrase. I can't remember my lines. My lines. I can't remember my lines, and it's because my mind will just go blank. And it took me a long time to understand. In fact, only recently I come to understand that that's a characteristic of dyslexia, because I'm not able to what I'm trying to remember hasn't been registered. I refer to it as a memory registry dysfunction, because it's not registered like on the hard drive. There's a registry where you can give a command and the CPU knows how to go get that because it's in a particular place. But if it's not registered, in my brain, it's just in there. Stuff will show up at random. People marvel at the shit that I can remember at times, but it's at random. It's not on call, and for immediate recall, intuition can access a lot of that too. But anyway, the not being able to remember my lines, and
Yeah, I think it's a little different than like speech aphasia because I can concentrate and learn really well. I've always been able to, but
right.
it's just losing the words when I'm trying to the output.
The immediate recall of the words.
Yeah, it's concepts.
So
I can hang on to math, all that kind of stuff. I can hang on to.
It's confined more to where the language
Speech
happens. Because you're right. One of the things that I've noticed about you is that shit. So here you're doing this social work, right? And you say, well, I'm going to become a programmer.
Software
you know,
engineer, Arlen.
software engineer.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
more
right.
fancy.
Let's
Yeah.
keep the terminology straight here. And so then, you quit your job, and you go to a training protocol. You go through a process of memorizing a bunch of information, and then practicing how to use that information. And in a year or two, or however long it was, you come out and you have a beginning level of competency at doing something that is radically different from anything that you'd done before.
Yeah, now I'm managing a group of them, so
Yeah, and
yeah.
and yeah, now you're managing the people who do that. But I noticed that, uh, and you were only one examples of many examples that I began to notice, that education for some people is not climbing Mount Everest. You want to get a PhD in some particular subject area? Yeah, it takes you 6 years. If you've already got your first four in, then it takes you 2 years, and I knew this guy that was a bit of a goofball, right? He was a recovered addict, or recovering addict, or whatever, and just a generally, he was an okay guy, but he was a bit of a schmuck, and he was just sloppy with life. And he decides he's going to get his doctorate in, I think, psychology. And a year and a half later, he's got a PhD in psychology. And I thought, how the hell does he do that? This guy isn't really smart enough to know, as they would say, fight your way out of a wet paper bag. But he could just do it. Well, his memory.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned about that is that he has a fairly normal, regular functioning memory, and he can read stuff and remember it. And you just prove that you've got it memorized, and if you can prove that you memorized the information, they'll say, okay, you're a doctorate in this, And anyway, but I noticed with you were certainly one of those people who could just sit down and go learn something new. And that helped me then, by contrast, to have a better understanding of myself in terms of what I'm not good at. So that eventually it turned into being able to let go at trying to prove that I'm good at it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things in this inventory I've been taking, that so far it looks like that an awful lot of my life, well, in fact, Jason, you named it. You said that my presentation, my persona, the way I presented myself, would camouflage the authenticity of what it is I actually have to offer.
Yeah.
You remember telling me that?
Yeah, you're living vicariously through a version of yourself that's like sort of I don't know, that's pretending to have the positive qualities, but in an arrogant way that the real you actually possesses.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so my way, prior to you saying that, my way of understanding that was that it's like I wear a mask, and the mask is a replica of me. So it resembles
like
the authentic me, but it gave me the psychological protection of vulnerability socially. But it doesn't get the same response from people in front of me. The mask does not get, even though the mask is an accurate replica of me, it doesn't something as the authentic me, because there has been times when my authenticity was out front and I get a different response.
Yeah, and that's when people like sniff it out, like how dogs know how you're feeling. If you're upset with them, they don't want to come near you because they intuitively know what's going on.
Yeah,
it's like it's just intuitively responsive to authenticity.
Yeah, and whether they're aware of it or not is my thought, is that that intuition runs subliminally a lot. And
right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, but that pertains in some way to one of the takeaways. It pertains to what I've learned about you in our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have any this time, but I'm sure I will in the future episodes, and I'll bring them up when I get them. But looking forward, like in the next, so what I noticed is like, I mean, we talk about all different kinds of stuff, but I think there's like three sort of topics that we kind of keep coming back to, or three trends or something like that. So
Yeah, themes.
yeah, themes. There you go. One is like fear, like we always talk about fear of freedom, existential guilt. Being in possession of your will is one of them, right?
Yeah, agency.
Right, and we talk about like death anxiety a lot, the role of death anxiety in like as it motivates the inauthenticity of the ego and stuff like that, and sort of trying to overcome like these defense mechanisms that we've built up throughout our lives in coping with death, basically. And then
Yeah.
the third one we talk about a lot is like masculinity. We talk a lot about masculinity,
Uh-huh.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just like letting like viewers know that that's kind of like we're going to talk about all kinds of different shit, but like these are kind of the themes that we dig into a lot. I think.
The themes that you see in
Yeah.
our conversations.
Yeah.
Well, and we tend to understand things in accordance to our history. So these are things that you've studied.
Mm-hmm.
Death anxiety, you've gone way more deep on than I have, but I recognize the relevance to life from the things you've shared with me about what you've read. This is one of the places where your academics is complementary to my learn by doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And then one other thing that might be worth sticking in here about where I come from is that my life has been and continues to be a laboratory in which the scientist and the guinea pig, I play the role of both the scientist and the guinea pig.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly studying myself in the context of what's going on around me.
Yeah.
And who am I and how do I tick? And to the degree that my psychology is somewhat universal or typical, then I've learned about my fellow human beings by learning about myself. And so that has to do with my journey as an autodidactic, and in which life is the classroom. Life is the training.
I don't know if it's worth mentioning though, but neither one of us are classically educated. I'm a high school dropout with a GED. I don't have a college degree, and then you don't have a college. You graduated high school, but you don't have a college degree, right?
Right.
Right. So we're both almost completely self-educated. So.
Well, we're both autodidactics.
Yeah.
And there's nothing short. What one learns is what they learn, whether they do that in a classroom or from a book. I think that what we learn from application and life as an experiment is much more practical and reliable knowledge than what we've read in a book. But whether we read that in a book as a part of a college coursework or as an autodidactic education, what's written on the page of the book is the same. And of course, I'm aware of the fact that the professor creates the context for what those words on the book, but so does life. Life provides a context for the usefulness and the relevance of what we read.
And that kind of goes into the title of the podcast, right? A philosophy for living.
Well,
Yeah.
And living our philosophy.
Right.
That's the coursework right there. Live, which is really the true definition of a philosopher is one who lives the philosophy that they conceive.
Right.
And the difference between a philosopher and someone who studies philosophy is the one who the philosopher is the one who lives it.
Right.
And we both, I think we've both done this guinea pig and scientist thing. You know, we do experiments with ourselves and on ourselves. Certainly, your trips with the hallucinogenics,
Yeah.
psychedelics is experimentation, and then, but what makes a difference, Jason, is that then you stop and you reflect on what was that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and also the application, the traction action. It's like, what do I do with this? This is what I've found out. Now, how do I use this in my life? So yeah, live our philosophy is. We may want to talk more about
Right.
what that means at one of our other sessions.
I think this is actually a good place to end it.
Uh-huh.
Live our philosophy, right? And
Yeah,
then we can
right.
pick up on the next one. So
Yeah,
yeah.
we've intuitively navigated to an appropriate closure.
All right. So should we thank our watchers for watching or listening? So thank you if you're watching and listening.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we'll see you next time.
yeah, tune in and do the punch the bell thing and all that stuff so that you can keep track
Oh
of
yeah,
what we
subscribe,
got going.
like, and then solve that riddle and put it in the comments.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Bye.
maybe I should repeat that riddle real quick, huh?
Well, it's in the video. They can go back to it whenever they
Oh,
want. We can
all right.
we'll
Yeah.
timestamp it. Is what we'll do.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, stamp the riddle.